Hi guys, so welcome to a video on JavaScript, and where we kind of just dissect some JavaScript concepts. Today we're going to talk about a callback. A callback is something that you guys have been using for quite some time, and I'll show you guys something that you guys have already been using for since the beginning of JavaScript in Sprint 4, and I'll show you guys why it's a callback, why it's useful, and how we can actually implement our own callbacks to make our code a little bit more accessible and dry. So here's a callback that you guys have already seen. I'm gonna come to my HTML pane here, and I'm gonna create a new button. I'm gonna give it an ID of button, and I'm just gonna name it random button. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab it inside of JavaScript. I'm just gonna call it random button, and I'm going to use that by going document.get element by ID, and we're gonna grab button. Now, as always, you know me, I like to use console.log, so I'm going to make sure that I'm grabbing it. So let's run that, and as you can see, I am grabbing button. I'm not getting undefined or an error. So if I click on random button, you can see that nothing happens because there is no event listener added to button. It's not in charge of doing anything. So we already know how to do that, and we can do that by going random button.add event listener, and we want to listen for the click event, and when that happens, we want to just console.log out again. We're going to console.log out click. Alright, so let's run that. Let me clear this, and let's see if we see click, 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 and that's exactly what is happening. So this is actually a callback. What is a callback? This function right here. That is a callback function. Why is that? Well, we have to understand when our code, what lines of code are running and when. So we're going to call this page load. What do we expect to see when I hit this run button? Let's see. We can see that I get that page load when I run it. And you can, so when we hit this run button, what JS Fiddle does is just completely clears it and then just reruns it, almost like if it's reloading the page. So you can kind of think of this button as just like this refresh button. But obviously, because it's an engine running inside the browser, we don't want to actually refresh what we're working on now. But this is pretty much reloading the page when we hit that run button. So we get that page load message there. But you notice that we don't get this click, and why is that? What's inside of this function does not run until we actually click the button. And now anything that is inside of this function goes ahead and executes. This is very useful because we can give a function, we can define code that we want to run when this event happens. So this code does not run. It may be read by JavaScript on page load, because on page load, what is happening? It is starting at line 1. It is assigning a memory value to random button, and what does it assign it to? It assigns it to what we get back from this document.get element by ID.button. So it is assigning this element to random button. It now goes to line 3. It says, okay, in this value, we're going to add an event listener. What are we listening for? We're listening for click. What do we want to happen on that click? We want this function to execute. Awesome. It binds that event to the button. It doesn't execute it, but it goes ahead and makes button aware that it's listening for this click, and it wants this to run when that event occurs. It goes to line 7. It says, okay, here we're just spitting out page load inside of the console, and we go ahead and see that. The benefit of a callback is, again, we get to define code that runs at a certain time and in a different context. How is this of benefit to us? Well, we've already seen that at this point we may have already be on project 8 or project 7, where we begin to implement object-oriented programming, our classes, into our JavaScript. And we've already implemented callbacks into our project. So you may already see this benefit. But what's actually happening? Well, let's just make a kind of a concise version of this callback, just so we can kind of wrap our head around what's actually happening. So we're going to go to, we're going to create our own function that takes in a function. So we're going to call this function with callback. And this function is going to take a callback function. What is going to happen here? First, we're going to console.log hello from with callback. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this callback right here, and we're actually going to go like this, right? So at this point, what is this? If the user is using this function correctly, this should be a function. What can we do with a function? If we add the parentheses right there, we're actually going to call that as a function. We can even pass parameters to it, and we'll show that in just a second. But here we're actually going to call with callback. So what is going to happen when we run? Let's clear the console. Let's run it. Absolutely nothing. We get nothing in here. We don't get hello from with callback. Why? We have not even called the function. We just defined it. So we're going to go ahead and call that function, and we're going to pass in a function. And what do we want to have happen? Well, we're actually going to console.log my favorite. We're going to go. We're going to say greetings from with. Greetings from callback. Let's clear this console and run it. And what do we get? Well, let's walk through what's happening here. So line 1 comes in on page load. It says, okay, we have a function here called with callback. It takes in a parameter of callback. The first thing this function is going to do is it's going to console.log hello from with callback. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to take absolutely whatever we pass in here, and it's going to call it as a function. So it comes to line 6, and it says, okay, now it's time, and now it's ready to use with callback. It's time to do that. It's time to execute the function, and we pass in another function. And this function, what does it do? It simply just console.logs greetings from callback. So what do we see within the console? We see first this, hello from with callback, and then because it runs this function that we passed in, we get console.log. We get the console.log greetings from a callback. So what use is this? Well, it allows us to run. This is something that really comes in handy when we talk about async programming, and this is something that Promise is actually kind of made not obsolete, but callbacks are not used as much as as was before. That's because promises simply give us, kind of a nicer way to do it, syntactically. It kind of just looks a little bit cleaner. As you can imagine, imagine if this callback itself takes another callback, right? So, it can get really messy as that code just continues to get nested and nested and nested. But one thing you'll see is that callbacks can take a value that may not be available to you at this time, right? So let's say with callback, does a really complex calculation, right? So let's just say that. So let's say, let's actually rename it, and let's say get measurement, right? And we're gonna say get measurement. Did I spell that right? Let's just do that. All right, so get measurement. All right, so what we want to do inside of here is let's say we do a really complex math calculation, and we're actually just going to return a random number. well, actually, let's also take a moment to kind of figure out how we can do that. So let's say get random number JavaScript. What's math.random? Returns a floating point pseudo-random. Okay, so let's take this this nice little function that they did here. Get random. Let's take it out of that, and let's see what comes out. So let's just pretend that this is some really complex calculation that this function is going to do. And let's console.log it out. Random number. So this is the max. So let's just make this like 300. So it should return a random number from 0 to 300. Alright, so we get 218. What happens if we run it again? 223, 245. Wow, really around that 200 section. Okay, so that's what we're going to get, a random number. Now, let's say we need this random number out here, right? So this is pretty much the main thread. Let's say we're having some type of logic here. You know, complex, we'll just put complex business logic, right? So we have some stuff going on here, but now it's like, okay, so we need to get that measurement. But maybe this measurement is going to get run asynchronously, right? Let's pretend that this is going to a database, maybe a different server, and it gets this number that we need. We don't have that available to us here, but what we can do is use this callback function that takes in the random number. So now we have this random number inside of this callback function, because when this gets run, although we have no clue what this is when we're writing this function, we can go ahead and define what we want to happen when we actually get that value. And that's because this function is going to run at a later time when this random number is actually defined. So what can we do? Let's just simply say our random number is, and let's just go ahead and paste in random number. So what are we expecting to see? Let's take us a look. Our random number is 23. Let's run it again. 233, 86, 285, 197. Kind of cool. Has like a mind of its own, right? Can just give us a random number. So we see the benefit here as we don't know what this random number is at this moment, because get measurement is going to handle this logic for us. And as we said, if we could just simply return, right? We could just do this in this example, just return, you know, just return the actual number. And then we don't have to use the, you know, this callback method, because we can just say, you know, random number equals, you know, get measurement. Can't spell that. Right, get measurement, right? So then random number is available to us here, so we don't even have to use this. But as we said, this callback comes in handy when we need a value that can only be calculated or you know, given to us at a later time. And we see that concept in action with the button example. And I'll show you how. Document.get element ID. We're grabbing button. And we're adding an event listener. And we're going to define it under click. And we're going to add the event listener to us here. Console.log. We're just going to type hello. Let's see if we get it. Hello, cool. But remember, what value do we need that isn't available to us at this time? Remember, with an event listener, we get that event parameter there, that argument. And what does that, and what does that look like? here we get that event. Now remember the type of information that we can get on this event. We can get the target that's going to give us the button. We can get a lot of other things, like for example we can get the classes that were on it. We could even get the width of the element. I believe we can even get the scroll position of when it was clicked. We can come in handy. Let's say we're doing some fancy maybe we want to scroll, when this button is clicked, we want to scroll it to the top, right? We would need to know those numbers in order to calculate it. We get a lot of things available to us in this event because it gets passed to us in the callback. We're going to see this pattern a lot throughout the rest of JavaScript, especially, and we'll kind of see it also disguised a little bit with promises as well. So I just wanted to make this video kind of just to show you guys what a callback really is, because it's a concept that a lot of students struggle with in the beginning. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I also suggest that you guys look up on the internet, especially on YouTube. There's a lot of great videos that kind of give you great examples of what callbacks are used for. Any questions, please let me know. Continue coding.